And so then I come home and I tell my team this task we've got, and you can imagine they're all like, great, well, where's the op board? Where's the instruction? Where's the resources? I'm like, yeah, none of that exists, and you're not gonna get it. Like, we're gonna spend the next 5 years producing it.
Figuring it out, yeah.
But if the ball drops, you're gonna have to do it without that. How do we do that?
Consistency is a key component of good leadership. I'd rather work for a consistent jerk than somebody who's buddy-buddy with me one day and a jerk the next. My name is Patrick Donnelly, and I'm on a mission to build better leaders. Today's guest is Air Force Colonel David Wilson. I've known Dave for a number of years. I've seen him operate in a lot of different situations, and among the many great qualities that he has, one of the things that's most impressive to me is that Dave is the same guy whether he's talking to brand new airmen, his peers, or the most senior leaders in the Air Force and Space Force. Talking with Dave is always an inspiration to me, and I'm excited to introduce him to you.
Colonel Dave Wilson, thanks so much for joining me today on Building Better Leaders.
Thanks for having me.
So Dave, you and I met, you were a student at National War College. I was teaching there when we first met. And, you know, I don't do a lot of things well, but one thing that I feel like I'm pretty good at is recognizing talent. And you just had a great first impression on me. And I remember telling somebody who we both know, who grew up the same way you did, I'm like, yeah, I got this student this year, Dave Wilson. And I thought a lot about the person that I was talking to, and he's like, oh, Dave Wilson, that guy's the future. He is the future. And I was like, oh, wow, I guess my perception was pretty good. And we've been friends ever since. In fact, I owe you a lot because you went out to Peterson as a group commander equivalent and then took on a wing at JBER. And you were the first wing commander who trusted the Doolittle Leadership Center enough to bring us out and have us interact with your team. And that really was the thing that launched the Lead, Develop, Care process around the Air Force. And so just to start off with, I really appreciate our friendship and our partnership and the fact that you're here talking with us today. I'm excited about it.
No, well, thank you very much. Well, obviously you never read any of my papers at War College. That's good, right? So first impressions are probably what I focus on, not my writing prompt. But I appreciate you, and we'll talk a little bit more about it. But I think it leads to you've been a mentor and teacher of mine, quite literally, and so having those people in your orbit who maybe not are in your chain of command, but who can have been there, done that. You'd walk through some of those paths that I was preparing to walk through to help nurture the right instincts and maybe suppress some of the things that aren't so right. It takes a village, as we all know. But you've been a big part of that, and so I appreciate it. And then we'll talk in a minute about the JBER piece, but it just shows how important the network is, right? Because I was a new wing commander, I was in a new theater, right? And I had been given this challenge that when I tell it now, to me it's so obvious, and of course, but at the time it was a bit overwhelming, right? Yeah. Because I got a theater task from a 4-star general to prepare my unit to do a thing that sounds very auspicious. And so I went, I knew I wasn't gonna do it alone, nor could I, thank God. But you were one of my first phone calls because I was like, well, who knows how to do this? And my team, how do I help my team think about this thing that we aren't prepared to think about? And you were one of my first calls. And quite frankly, when I was just looking for ideas, I think it was my first note, like, hey, sir, I don't know, help me, who should I start with? And you went, well, we've got this idea. And I remember thinking like, wow, I wasn't even looking for you to solve my problem, but I love it. And yeah, and you did huge work. And then I can just tell you the feedback from my team, as you know, we brought you back multiple times.
Right.
And anybody willing to fly to Anchorage in February, right? That you get a badge of honor just for that. And so yeah, rave reviews. And then I know from all of my wingmen, brothers and sisters out there that you have visited, the same thing. And so and we need more of it. We need to invest more in it because if I learned anything in Wing Command, leading leaders is hard work.
It is.
And we don't prepare ourselves for that well.
Yeah, and on that note, one of the things that really distinguished you in the way that you handled those times that we came out and worked with your airmen, every single class, and we taught 4 different classes of airmen when you were there, every single class, you made it a point to show up at lunch and to spend lunchtime talking with your airmen that were going through that class and communicating to them why that class was personally important for you.
Yes, sir. You know, one thing that my command chief, Dan Guzman, right, who's probably
I remember him.
If Dan, if Dan's out there somewhere, he's a outstanding retiree now, solving big problems for the world. But Dan was one of my like best advisors, of course, as a command chief should be. But Goose used to remind me that we're not done communicating, right? And so that's one thing I would tell any leader, especially in a senior leadership role, is that how you communicate, when you communicate. And that begins with what are you communicating, right? I think we're all like, give me a mic and I'll talk, but about what? And so that's where I started with this, like, what is the message to my wing, right? And I've had good friends, especially prior enlisted officers, who taught me, look, if it takes you more than 30 seconds, like, they're done listening. They have work to do, and they don't need your 5-point plan. So how do you nug that down into something that's they can hear, and then you just need to repeat it every time you're in front of them. And so to your point, General Wilsbach had given us the task, to me and to my fellow wing commanders in the 3rd Wing and the 356, like, you need to pick up your forces and move them into the South Pacific and deter aggression, without getting into all of the details. And there isn't an AFI that will tell you how to do it, and there isn't an instruction, and a lot of this is outside the box. And you got to do it as a team, right? So you can't draw these lines and go, oh, my toys. You got to do it together, and you got to get over yourselves. And so then I come home and I tell my team this task we've got, and you can imagine they're all like, great, well, where's the op org? Where's the instruction? Where's the resources? I'm like, yeah, none of that exists, and you're not going to get it. Like, we're going to spend the next 5 years producing it.
Figuring it out, yeah.
But if the ball drops, you're going to have to do it without that. How do we do that? And so as we started thinking through that problem set, how do you prepare the fuel shop and logistics? How do you prepare the engineers, right, to do this work? How do you build those capabilities? How do you prepare that first lieutenant who's going to be alone on an island and doesn't have the background to do all that work? And so every opportunity, whether it was commanders' calls or your lunch and learns or honestly ALS graduation, like, if I can get in front of them, I would always start with, hey team, we are working on this combat problem. We are training to it. And I'd get a question about, hey sir, what do you think about the new Air Force fitness test at the time? And I would go, hey, I whatever the Air Force says we're doing, I love it. My problem today is, sending a small number of you to a remote island and having you operate under enemy fire.
Yeah.
And it just is not the Air Force that I grew up in, because we deployed to big bases in CENTCOM AOR, and you're going to take a small debt of people to do a thing inside the enemy threat ring in an environment, and resupplying you is going to be a challenge. And so to your point, like, so when you would come down and teach and talk to our mid-level leadership about how to think about these problems differently, and how to like drive change at their level, how to lead effectively, that was an opportunity for me to go in and go, hey, all the stuff you're about to learn or you just learned, let me connect it back to this agile combat employment, right?
Yeah.
Like, this problem we're trying to solve. And it is audacious, but one of the reasons I've been doing this for as long as I have, and the thing I love about the Air Force, is I am not an aviator. I'm not a pilot. I've got horrible vision, right? Throw my guts up if you put me upside down in an aircraft. But I'm an airman, and we try to instill in our combat support airmen that you have a role in this.
Right.
And that role is, to use Doolittle, right, as our mark here, like, to think differently than traditionally would be expected. That's what we bring to the joint fight. And so, once you can get a whole group of people to remove the blinders and move in that direction, and this is the job of leaders, and to see like, wow, we can really do this differently when we start painting outside the lines, it's amazing how effective you can get, right? And so you were a big part of that for us.
Well, I'm grateful for that. And I did see the impact. And over time, I saw you enough where I saw you kind of beating that drum of, hey, let's remember why we're here, why we're doing this. And in terms of lead, develop, care, which is the model that we teach, what you're talking about is, how do I communicate the target? And we call that setting direction. The first task of any leader within the lead primary responsibility is, my job is to lay out a target that everybody knows this is what we're aiming at. And not just laying it out once and hoping everybody gets it, but making sure that every person that you're directly responsible for understands that's the target and this is my role in getting to that target.
That's right.
And I saw you do that super effectively.
Thank you.
I remember that conversation that we had that first time. One of the great things about it was I had just finished the Legends Tour, and I had a number of amazing airmen in my contact list, and we were actually able to bring General Jumper in for about an hour and a half, where
Yes.
General Jumper just sat down with your key leaders and just answered questions and thought through the problem set with you.
So that was, I joke about this, right? You gave me a ton of credibility, right, that I probably didn't deserve. So, you come out there to teach the course, and to anybody listening who's, thinking through leadership challenges, right? I've never had the best idea. Like, I'm not the smartest guy in the room. The sooner you accept that as a leader, and that you realize that you have people that have the solution, tap into them or let them be part of it, you'll find great success. And so as we were thinking through this, and I'm giving my group commanders and squadron commanders this kind of like audacious task we've been given, they rightfully go, sir, I'm not sure where to even start, right?
Yeah.
I don't even know what question to ask, which led me to some kind of education, thinking outside the box, and that brings you up to Alaska. And so as you come up, you mentioned like, hey, General Jumper really wants to be involved. And I remember I had a minor moment of panic because I went, okay, well, Wing Commander, like I can do a lot of stuff without running that through the channels. I can't just bring up a former Chief of Staff of the Air Force without telling a bunch of people. But then, of course, General Jumper's calendar didn't work out. And so what we had planned was he was going to dial in and just give a few comments. So, of course, so you're coming up to brief. I believe it was squadron commanders, SCLs, and maybe first sergeants in our big conference we have there at JBER, made famous recently by the Alaska Summit.
Right.
And so you were going to teach this course about trying to help those squadron commanders, hey, your boss has given you this audacious problem without a lot of solutions.
Yeah. Change leadership. How do you exist in the midst of change?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so we're like, hey, General Jumper's going to dial in and just talk for a few minutes. Well, of course, we get General Jumper on the line, and he talks for a little over an hour. But it was so perfect because he gave credibility to all of their fears. Because sometimes at tactical level, and not to pick, I work on the air staff now, so not to pick on those of us who do this for a living, but you're like, well, there must be someone smarter than me thinking about this problem, writing a solution.
Right.
And no offense, rarely is that the case. We're thinking about big problems, but we're working in a 5-year defense planning structure. And so we've been telling the team, like, hey, if you're waiting for some guideline, some PACAF solution, it's not going to come in time in the way you think.
Right.
And General Jumper got on the line and said just that. He's like, hey, the Air Force isn't looking at this problem the way like you're having to look at it today. They are, but in a long time scale,
right,
in
and
a
in a
large
much
resource
enterprise-focused perspective.
And so your task at JBER to take a very specific capability and employ it in a very specific way. They have great empathy for you, but that's what you do. Your job is to solve this problem. And then he walked through all of and oh, by the way, he kind of added on the cart. He went, if you're not thinking about it, you need to be thinking about fuels, munitions, recovery, security, medical, and all of those things, right? And training. And how are you training your airmen, right? He has a lot of talk, but how do you prepare them for that environment when they're there doing it? And and the runway has been destroyed, and there's no resupply coming until you fix it. And so it was wonderful because I got to say, hey, we brought General Jumper out, right? Like we must know people. But then it opened the door when you came in and said, okay, now that we've framed this horrible, nasty, challenging problem that's been given to you airmen, how do we solve it? Like what do you do in your foxhole to prepare your unit to do this thing? And my wing, I used to remind them all the time, no one's coming to your rescue. And I didn't mean that negatively, but I'm like, PACAF isn't going to show up with a staff of people and a bag of cash. We're to be preparing now to go do this. And then we will inform, which I find myself doing a lot now, in the halls of decision-making, what we learned.
Right.
And as we make those changes going forward. And so so much came out of it. It was Wing Command is the best job ever, but it also just being faced with that problem set, trusted by people like General Wilsbach and General Crum and General Nahom and General Schneider to like lead your wing, get after it. And it does renew a bit my faith in what we do, because every time I hear someone say, oh, kids these days, I'm like, airmen really aren't as different as you like to think they are.
Right.
Right. And yes, we have electronic devices maybe we didn't have 30 years ago, but they join for the same reasons, with the same fears and the same aspirations, and they want to be part of something. and they want their leader not to raise their shoulders and go, I don't know what we're going to do. It's not fair. And they want their leader to go, hey, take a complex, wicked problem and make it simple. Tell me what my role is in it, and then challenge me to run a little faster and do a little more to catch the pass. And then when I fail, have enough grace and patience to go, look, if it's not life or death, it's not life or death.
Yeah.
Don't make that mistake again. Move on to tomorrow. That will lead to an environment of people who go, hey, it's fine. It's fine to try hard and fail. The boss wants us to get there.
Right.
And so when I hear people say, well, we are so risk averse, like, well, then we need to make some changes. And I'll be honest, I don't buy that notion as much, because I've seen NCOs, I've had senior NCOs who go, boss, tell me what you want, give me the resources, and move out of my way.
Right.
You put those people in charge and they will get stuff done.
Yeah, gosh, Dave, there's so much there that I think is worth emphasizing a little bit. The first thing that you said out of that conversation was, you're not the smartest guy in the room. And that's not self-deprecating. You're not the smartest guy in the room. Nobody's if you're the smartest guy in the room, you're in the wrong room. Right?
That'll be the title of my biography.
Yeah. And the fact that as a wing commander, you had that sense early and said, I'm not the smartest guy, but there's smart people in this room. How do I take the good ideas that they have and help move those forward? I think is one of the things that oftentimes young leaders struggle with. And I'm talking brand new staff sergeant, brand new lieutenant, brand new squadron commander, brand new wing commander, brand new general officer, perhaps. There is a sense of, I am playing a role. I am in a position now where I have to feel like I've got it all together and that I'm the smartest guy. I think the quicker you get rid of that notion and admit that I'm not the smartest guy and I need your help, the better off you are.
Yes. No, well, before we came on air here, I was talking about, that first year as a colonel, you're a bit of a fraud. Like, I was kind of playing the role of a colonel. Like, I know what colonels look like, so I've got the eagle on, so I better act like one, right? And I think that applies to everybody. And so the story that I'll tell, and this applies even up till today, right? So my team in general officer management, right? I'm the only, and when I ran colonel assignments before this, I was the senior guy, which is scary a bit, right? But my team is made up of NCOs and captains, right? And so they're the ones doing the work behind the scenes. So I'll tell a story when I was a young lieutenant, and I'm not a prior guy, so when I say young, I was young, right? I was early 20s, I was a baby. And I'll never forget, and I won't mention her name because she's still out there in the Air Force doing wonderful things and serving our airmen greatly. But the first 18-year-old, right out of tech school, that showed up in my orderly room was this, like all 18-year-olds, right? Disgruntled, and it's cold here and it's not where I'm from, and you people are all idiots, kind of philosophy. And I love her dearly to this day. But what I learned from her, because as a second lieutenant, once again, I was learning, but I don't know how to do this stuff, right? The tech sergeant knows how to do it. And he was, Kelvin Steele, who I love dearly, taught me so much, old enough to be my big brother, maybe dad in some worlds. But what I learned from her was I was not capable to tell her how. I mean, I could in some things, very tactical, but I just didn't have that. It wasn't in my lexicon.
Yeah, you hadn't been in long enough to have a capability, a technical capability.
But I remember from her, these are leadership things. So once again, the A1C taught the lieutenant, but if I told her this is what I need this thing, and she would go, well, how do you want it? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know how I want it, because I don't know how it works. I don't know how you do it, but I know that I want this in state. Right? And how you do it really, and of course I thought, I know how I would do it, and I'm sure I'm brilliant. And then she did it better, faster, and had an output that was like 10 times what I would have come up with. And I went, well, why'd you do it that way? And she's like, well, you said you didn't care how, and I delivered it. And of course, I get that first feedback from the squadron commander, who comes to me and goes, Dave, great job on X, Y, or Z. And I was like, sir, that was all airmen. She's like, well, either way, thanks for fixing it. And I saw a pattern, and this young lady, and I can tell you all day stories about her, doing the same thing. And then I realized, oh man, her disgruntled, kind of grumpy, I don't want to be here, was just waiting for someone to give her purpose. And then she got that purpose. And on top of that, as I grew, right? So as a wing commander, I had the same conversation, and I would laugh when they would leave my room, with squadron and group commanders, because I would have someone who would say, well, sir, how do you want this done? And I would hear second lieutenant in my ear, and I'd go, I don't care how you do it. What I want is the airmen better trained. What I want is more time spent on this capability. What I want is a kit that I can fit on a C-130 in this sort, and you can't, and if you come to me and say, well, I need 4 pallet positions, I'm gonna say, you're gonna get a quarter of one, maybe none. And they go, well, how do I do that? I don't know how you do it. But you tell me what resources you need, what time you need, and what we're not gonna be able to do based on these limb facts, and then I'll adjust parameters. And I know that sounds, a lot of people listening are like, well, that sounds like a lot of wand waving about problems, but I have found great success in that, and the success that I've had, because those people are smarter than me. And you can't get hung up in rank, because no offense, like the squadron commander may not be the one with the answer, but it will be their staff sergeant. Yeah. It will be their deputy who's a retired master sergeant. It will be their deputy who's a retired lieutenant colonel. Somebody in the formation will go, well, actually, I think I know how we can do that. I'll highlight my team at JBER just for a second.
And by the way, that's Joint Base Elmendorf Richardson.
Yes, sir.
So that's up in Anchorage.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Yes. I'm biased, but the premier power projection platform on the planet, right? Especially in the DoD. So the comm squadron commander at the time there, who's now a colonel, and he's going on to do great things, and he's wonderful. But I remember we were solving this ACE problem, and I'm working through I don't even know how, step one. And I go to his section, and comm is one of the most complicated and most critical nodes in how we do this.
Yeah, for sure.
And he shows me, hey, sir, I've got this kit. It's man portable, meaning one person can carry it. And he goes, we've taped out a pallet position on the ground in this warehouse. And he's like, and we're literally challenging the airmen to figure out how they can shrink their gear down into a smaller footprint so that we can get, more stuff with less lift. And then I'm like, this is fantastic. No other unit is doing this, looking at the problem from this logistical mindset. And then I go, well, what do you need? And he hands me one page, and it's a chart, and he says, well, you've tasked me for 4 spokes. And he goes, I can do 1. And he's like, with this much money, I can do 2. With more than that, I can do 3. And he goes, all the money in the world won't buy you 4. But he goes, you need to call the headquarters to get this capability and this thing to get you 4. Oh, by the way, you've been tasked right now for 4. And I went, okay. So, and I used to tell my team, that's the homework I want. And so, unfortunately for the rest of the wing, I said, you all need to go visit the comm squadron.
Okay.
They don't have all the answers, but they are solving the right problem, right? And then
they're thinking about the problem correctly.
And once again, it would be easy for me to go, man, Dave Wilson's I'm so bright. But that was a squadron commander. And quite frankly, if he were standing here, he'd go, it was actually not me, it was the tech sergeant.
Yeah.
But they were solving the right problem, and then they were passing up the chain. They're like, look, we don't need guidance on how to do this. We just need you to know, here's what we can do. And if you want the thing you say you want, I need this. And to be frank, sometimes we come back and go, well, maybe I don't want as much as I thought I did.
Yeah.
Or in credit to PACAF, to give them where credit is credit due, the 6 came down and went, I hear you, I'm going to fund the 3 pallet positions right now. And we got money for that, right? And of course, the wing gets a lot of man, they're leading the way. And I just think back to that second lieutenant moment where I was like, just tell your team tell them the what, and let them work the how.
But, Dave, that sounds easy. It sounds like, I just got to do that. But most units, to be frank, don't operate that way. You were able to create a culture that began to operate and think that way. Was it just repetition? Was it empowerment? Was it empowerment with accountability? How did you sort of move people over to where they started not only thinking in that way, but actually delivering in that way?
I think it was all of those things to some extent, and like with any command job, and you know this well, sir, having worn the badge a lot, more than I did. There are some people. If you did a poll of people that were in my unit, you're going to get some that go, "Wow, he was great." And they're like, "Who?" And some they're like, weakest guy I've ever bumped into. It's just the nature of polling. Sure. The only thing that I would add to all the things that you just laid out, from accountability to empowerment, and all of those things are critical. But one other word I would add is relationships, right? There is a relationship part of this, right? Because you can't do it by yourself.
Yeah.
And the number of people that I've met in my career who go, well, if I just had all the authority and all the resources, yeah, well, that of course, if only, right? You know, if
Yeah,
only,
sure.
And it never works that way. And the pitch that I give to leaders who want to be leaders, who want to continue to be leaders, is if you think it gets easier as you move up, you're mistaken. It gets harder. Relationships become a bigger issue, and how you partner and how people feel about you. And as an outstanding boss, Major General Jim Smith taught me, right? Like, it is a mistake to burn a strategic relationship for a tactical win. And so that's the other thing I would add is that, you know, as the commander, you have to communicate, you have to know what the vision is. And I didn't come up with that, right? I was very fortunate to have leaders like General Wilsbach, to have leaders like General Nahom and General Crum, General Eifler in the Army, right, my joint base leader on the other side of the division, telling me what their requirement was, telling me the what, right? At that level, they don't give you the how. They sometimes don't give you all the what, right? And so telling me, like, this is what we need from you, and then turning to my team and setting down the people around me, you know, Don Weckhorst, who I just, you know, can't sing enough praises for Mr. Weckhorst, who's the executive director up at JBER and, you know, an old Viper pilot. But setting down people like that who have forgotten more about this business than I will ever know and going, hey, this is the task we've been given, right? I think some of this looks like this.
Yeah.
You know, my initial gut is that these are our priorities. And then I would turn to my group commanders, my command chief, Mr. Weckhorst, my deputy, heck, my spouse, right? Who's kind of my true north in all things, you know, keep my, you know, because I can bite off more than I can chew a lot. And then they help me shape it, right? And I think, to your point, that applies at every level, right?
Yeah.
When I was a OIC in charge of 4 people, and the squadron commander would give me the what for about, you know, timeliness, stop being so late, Dave, and screwing this up, I would go back to my team and go, hey, guys, this is the task we've been given. We have to do Y. I think maybe it looks like this. And then they would go, you know, brainstorm. Squadron level, right? The same thing. Like, these squadron commanders that I bump into, and they're like, I don't have enough people, enough resources. I'm like, well, where's your deputy and your chief and your first sergeant and your, right? You have people in your organization. What do they think? And it's to be alone is dangerous, right? As a leader. And the message I used to give my team all the time is, and some of this was me, like any comic will tell you got to win the crowd before you can get into the hard truths. So I used to tell my team, like, hey, we are undermanned. And, you know, everyone's, oh, amen. And we are under-resourced. And we are overtasked. And they're like, yeah, yes, preach it. And I'm like, and oh, by the way, we're not getting any of those things. Like, if you think I'm going to show up with more people and more money, that ain't going to happen. But then I would go, but our wing of 5,500 people, of 4 groups, 2 CE squadrons, 2 logistics squadrons, one of the largest security forces squadron in the theater, the largest hospital in the Indo-Pacific. When you say it like that, it sure sounds like we have a lot of resources. And everyone's like, oh, yeah, but those aren't mine. Yeah, but they're ours. Right? And so we got to look at the problem set that way. And I think sometimes, you know, we were talking about a moment ago, seeing the world from your boss's seat helps. Because there'll be times when someone will say to me, hey, I need a generator. And they'll say, well, I don't have a generator, so I can't do the thing you want. And then I look at C and I go, how many generators are on our inventory? Oh, we have 47 generators. I'm like, well, we have lots of generators. Well, yeah, but none of those are mine. But they're ours. Yeah. And so I'm not going to go ask the Air Force for another generator when I have 47. I made that number up, so before the CEG loses their mind. And like now we may have to have conversations about what the priority is. We may have to have conversations about if we move that generator, this is what we impact.
Right.
But I think that's one thing leaders have to help the team look at the problem set from a larger perspective, right?
Think outside of just the very nearsighted perspective.
Well, and you know, and I know you and I as combat support airmen, right? That's our life. Is, you know, every squadron comes in and goes, hey, I need, you know, I'm a personnelist. I'm a force support officer, and so, you know, my tribe always does this. Sir, we need time for training or entry or whatever. And I go, I hear you. But the maintainers need your support. They can't do their job without your support. And they work miserable hours in horrible weather. And so you got to know what your job is. And I get it that you need that time, and we'll find it for you. But it isn't at the expense of them. But it requires you to look up and see the whole problem set. Now, it's easier as a leader when you're put in a position to see that and to look at the world that way.
Sure.
But my feedback to combat support officers is always that, right? It's you know, if you want to talk to me about your soda straw problem, okay, But what I'm interested in is you talking to your peers across this installation. So I used to tell my team, I said, wouldn't it be great if, when I was talking to senior NCOs, wouldn't it be great if you all had a network, of course they do, across the installation, where the master sergeant and the different units just brought their problem to you, and you just solved their problem, or at least got to where it didn't get solved. And of course, I'd get an amen from all the chiefs and all the squadron commanders. I'm like, hold on, before you get too excited, wouldn't it be great, squadron commanders, if you guys did the same thing? Like, oh well, instead of everything ending up on the wing commander's desk, and then me and Jinx having to sit down and figure out how we do it. And I know it's easy to say that, and having been in those jobs, yes, sir, that's super easy to say. But as you know, the people that succeed and that have that kind of get to that culture that we're talking about are the ones who embrace it, and realize this is a team sport, and that's what I love about it.
Yeah. I mean, the team focus is so important, and yet there are some externalities that almost drive us to be individual focused. And it takes the leader to help people see outside of that. And one of the things that you mentioned that I think I don't want to let it pass without touching on it is the importance of relationship. There are mission areas that we have to get done. That's what we get paid to do. That's the lead piece of lead develop care. There's the care side, which is how do I ensure that the people who are doing that are actually thriving? And then the develop piece is how do I make sure that they're continuing to grow and become better than they are? I often say that in the midst of mission issues or developmental gaps that need to be met, the thing that very often facilitates that lead and develop capability is how well have I done the care piece? And so sometimes care is the initial enabler that makes those other things happen. And it sounds to me like you had been able, in the time that you were there, to communicate to people not only this is my expectation and this is what I need from you, but a corresponding, and in the midst of it, this is what you get from me. This is the care that I am committing to provide to you. How did you do that? Because I've watched your impact on people. I've seen you be super friendly, and I've seen you also be able to give a directive that's pretty clear. Small example, the lights in the room that we were in were all screwed up. And I remember you saying, why are these lights still messed up? Okay, we need to get this fixed. And it was like, no question, the person that was in the room that needed to fix those lights was like, I have a do out. But how do you both, how did you do that? Or what advice do you have for supervisors at any level to better connect with their people so that they sense that this person has my best interest in mind, even while they're thinking about the mission?
So there's a cliche that is a cliche for a reason, because it's a truism, right? And it's people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And that is it can be as simple as that. One thing that I have developed over the years, and out of giving a lot of feedback to a lot of squadron commanders and getting a lot of feedback from senior leaders, it started out, I used to, when I would kind of give my because every time you give feedback to a subordinate, they've got their pen and paper in hand and they're looking for that brilliant talking point, which I'm shy on, right? Most of my stuff comes out of a General Powell book or something, right, that I read, I've co-opted. And there's a reason to do that too, so read his stuff. But one thing that I've come up with over years, I used to say, hold yourself and others accountable. And I would say, hey, empathy matters. Put yourself in others' shoes.
Right.
But as I mentored commanders, I realized those are actually the same thing. And so now my bullet is equal parts empathy and accountability. And so I tell people all the time, hey, some of us lean one way or the other, right? You're a defender, sir. Also, cops are good at accountability, right? We will, there is a standard and we will meet it. Maybe not always so great at the empathy part. I know some are great, but I'm saying it's not our style, right? Yeah. Maintenance too. Personnelists, we tend to be more in the other camp, right? We're big blue personalities and we love holding hands. Sometimes we're not as good at the bad news. And so what I would tell my commanders is a healthy unit can do both.
Yeah.
And if you find yourself leaning too much on your natural, I'm an accountability guy, or I'm a pray, hope, love kind of person, your unit is going to struggle because it needs both.
Yeah, 100%.
So I tell you that to say, and I'm going to give credit where credit is due, and she would hate me doing this, but Colonel Kat Logan was my squadron commander when I was an ops officer, and I love Kat. She's a dear friend. And I learned something about myself and leadership working for Kat, because we are wholly different people. She's a, not to keep using true colors, but she's a blue. She's a like uniter and everyone kind of together. And I'm not that guy, just not who I am. And so I'm the like, walk in the room and go, hey, where are you at on task number 4 I gave you yesterday? Right? And I don't stop and go, how you doing? How you feeling? How are your kids?
Yeah.
What's going on in your life? It's just not my wiring. And that's who she is. And it frustrated me because I couldn't communicate with her because she was my boss and I was her operations officer. And I learned from her, like, wow, I am woefully deficient. So it started out as an irritation because, of course, like all people, I was like, well, there's something wrong with her, not me.
Sure,
right?
Of course.
But then when I worked with her for a while, I was like, oh, actually, I'm bad at this. She's really good at this thing that I'm really bad at.
Yeah.
And so then when I became a squadron commander, I would lean into that, right? I like, hey, I know what I'm good at, but I know what I'm bad at. And so, and this goes back to when you have 30 seconds of an airman's time, what are you talking to him about?
Yeah.
And so for me, I always try to think, how would Colonel Logan deal with this? And so I'll walk into a situation and go, hey, where are you from? What's going on? When's the last time you took leave? Right? And because everyone will do the like, I'm good, sir. No, I mean, really, how's your family? Like, where are your parents at? What do they think about you being up here? And inevitably, someone will tell you something. And I can just say to all the leaders listening, the things I have discovered about people, about their capability, it's mind-blowing, and it was not me that did it, right? But if you give somebody an opportunity, I'll tell a story about a defender when I was a squadron commander, and I will not, mention names, but there was a defender who was having a really bad day, and there was a cop squadron commander who are trained so well as young leaders, and this commander was out at a post talking to defenders and could tell something's not right here. But it was kind of one of those like, whatever, you didn't have your coffee today, or, standing out in the cold at a post is not always pleasant. So sometimes you're not in a great mood.
Right.
And this defender is talking to this airman, and as they're talking, at one point they kind of step off to the side to go, hey, what's your deal? And when they're off to the side, this defender just poured their guts out in an unabashed moment of like truth.
Yeah.
And the commander went, copy, can I have your sidearm?
Right.
Right? And took him off a post. And at the time I was like, how did you do that? How did you know to do that? She's like, I didn't know. But she's like, but something wasn't right? They were giving me all the right signals. And every day it turns into nothing. But at this moment, this person was looking for somebody to give a darn. And she's like, so I listened, and I realized, like, well, I have a real problem. And you cannot be standing here with a gun in your hand.
Yeah.
And so as a wing commander and anyone in leadership, right, like when I had time with airmen, before I would pivot to, hey, here's what you can do for me, right? Take your PT test, turn your eval in, show up on time, right? Clean your uniform, do your training. They got to know that I give a darn about them. And the thing we're all this way. Once you know that your leaders care and they're in it with you, like we're all rowing this boat together, the things that you won't do for them, right? And quite frankly, if that's not enough, then you're probably in the wrong business. I mean, just to be frank, like that's okay, but you want to do something else. But those airmen who once they knew, like Colonel Wilson spends his time thinking about our training and worrying about what happens when we're on the battlefield and he's not there, those people will go in in a way that almost embarrasses me that I'm not running as fast as they are. And so to your point, it wasn't my moment of brilliance. Kat Logan, taught me that, hey, you really you cannot lead people if you cannot be empathetic.
Yeah.
And I've had this conversation with so many young leaders, and I won't, I know we're in DC, and so I won't get into politics of it all. But one of the messages that I give young people is like, you should have political tendencies. You should vote. You should think about these problems. You should have, like, it's your right as an American. I would argue it's your, it's an obligation. But then I always comment and go, but your airmen come from everywhere.
Right.
And they deserve a leader that gets them. And so be cautious that people don't go, well, I would tell you my problems, but you don't want to hear them. Right. And so,
yeah.
And so for me, that's like, every time I would walk into a situation, my airmen, if they were fuels, didn't need to be like, yeah, this desk jockey, he doesn't understand what it's like to be out here soaked in fuel all day long. Right. They just needed to know, like a boss who, they know I can't do the job as well as they can, but I'll get in the mud with you if that's what's necessary. And then when they have someone that empathizes and follows, that's how you get to accountability. That's how you get to like, hey, that's not right. This is what right looks like.
Yeah.
Because they know, you give a darn. And I would caution any leader, if you think you're going to go in with a hammer and your team doesn't think that you care about them, you're going to find a lot of struggle real fast.
Yeah, that's a lesson I learned as a lieutenant, that very quickly you realize I succeed or fail at the hands of 44 airmen, NCOs and senior NCOs that are getting me across the finish line, and they can allow me to run right off the cliff. They can choose to do that, or they can choose to keep that from happening. And the only difference is, have I communicated that I value them and that I care about them, and then they're going to keep me somewhat on track. One of the things you mentioned there with relationship, and I'm actually surprised to hear that that's not your strength, because I've seen you do that, and you've learned that lesson in a way that really comes across as quite naturally, but it sounds like you have to make an intentional aim to shift so that you are connecting in that way. That maybe in a normal situation, your default is just to go right for where are we with the task, et cetera. You're thinking about the mission. Within Lead Develop Care, we have what we call, everybody has a strength, a stretch, and a struggle. You're strong in one of them. You're okay with a little work. You can do okay in another one. And one of those three things, Lead Developer Care, it's just not who you are. It's not how you're wired. The thing I like about this model, and I think you did a great job illustrating it, is sometimes with things like the 4 lenses, it's like, well, I'm a blue, and because I'm a blue, these are things I don't do. Or because I'm an orange, these are things I don't think. Our model says, yes, you may really struggle in one of those 3 things, but you don't get a pass. Good leadership requires all 3. And you as a leader or as an individual supervisor have to figure out which of these 3 things is my struggle, and how do I move that to where I'm at least proficient. I may not ever be as good as I am at the other 2, but how do I at least get to a point where I'm proficient? Because if you don't, as you said just a second ago, there will be a failure point. There will be something that goes miserably wrong because all 3 are essential.
No, that's, I'll use an example of related, but not tied to the emotional intelligence piece of this, right? So, but simple. So I replaced General Aguilar in command, and I think the world of General Aguilar, and in so many ways she's so much better at this than I am, and anybody who's worked with us knows that. And but what your team wants is you to be self-aware. We've all had that boss that 5 minutes into it, they've diagnosed, like, hey, don't sit Wilson down at 1 o'clock in the afternoon to talk about finances, right? Because you're going to lose him, right? Because it requires, like, it's high order math. And
it needs to be fresh in the morning.
That's right about the time that I'm tanking, and I haven't had enough coffee. And so the sooner that you learn that about yourself or are honest about it, the sooner that you can adjust for it, right? And then you can inform people around you, right? So it's not an excuse to be bad at something, to your point. It's to know what your weakness is. And so, for example, like I joke with all my staffs, spelling, right? So when I was, as a new group commander, I'm faced with my first, because I was a squadron commander and I had a front office, but squadron command, you can still kind of grab the stick yourself and get stuff done.
Sure.
As a group commander, you can't. So I've got an exec for the first time who is an officer who I think the world of. I have a secretary who's, I did not deserve, extraordinary individual, wonderful chief and admin team. But they look at me and go, okay, what do you want? How do you want it? Where do you want it? When do you want it? Of course, I'm like, I don't know, right? And I realized pretty quickly that they were still supporting, like, in the General Aguilar way.
Right.
And I know General Aguilar. I'm like, hey, just so you know, I don't spell, like, I can misspell my own name. I was like, I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm not proud of my poor spelling, but I'm going to need you to help me, right? Like, and whereas General Aguilar was the type that could see a memo across the room and be like, hey, that's not how you spell management.
Right.
And I'm like, so you guys have gotten, like, and I know she would send back stuff with red ink, like, that's not me. So I was like, help me, right? And then knowing that about myself, like when I sit down to do evals, decorations, triple S's, something that I know is consequential, like I have to stop. I have to turn off the world around me. I have to stop thinking about the next problem. I have to focus on the thing I'm doing. And when I do that, I can do it well.
Yeah.
But what I can't do is compartmentalize 3 things and then get the result I want. I know that about myself. And so I, to your point on Lead Develop Care, I make the same argument to leaders, right? If you know that, I'm a green, this is why I like True Color so much, because I like diagnosing other people. Mm-hmm. If you know that you're a certain way, great. Well, then you shouldn't give it up, but you're good at it. It's natural for you.
Right.
You shouldn't, don't overthink it if you're good at it. But know what you're not good at, and know that people need that from you too, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And that you need to be that. And if you know it's a weakness, then you need to look inside, right? And that's why, so, the feedback you give me, A, I appreciate it, and B, I've heard it from a lot of people, because when I tell this story, a lot of people go like, that's not true, you're super empathetic. I am, it's a muscle that I develop, right? Yeah. I've learned how valuable it is, and it's the most rewarding thing I get out of people. But left to my own devices, it's just not my wife will be the first one to tell you, are you listening to me? You're looking in my direction, but you don't seem like you're paying attention, right? But you have to learn these things over time, right? And I will say, before this is a lot of me patting myself on the back, the thing I haven't walked you through are all my failures, right? And anyone will tell you, like, there's not enough time in a podcast to go through that, because most of these things that I just walked you through that were successes, I learned because I screwed something up 15 times.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I would just say, like, relationships that didn't go the way they should, or people that I missed an opportunity with, and I go, I don't understand why I didn't catch that. And so having struck out so many times, if you have any intellectual curiosity, you'll start to go, I don't understand why I'm not good at that. And then you can fix it. The people that I worry about are the ones that are so baked in stone. They're like, well, this is how I am. I'm a fully formed human. Nothing about me that can change. Well, then you're going to struggle in this line of work.
Yeah.
Because change is what we do.
Right.
And if you're looking for the Air Force to look like it did when you were, 20 years ago, you're going to be disappointed, because that's not where we're going, nor should we.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. It's self-awareness. It's being able to, what am I doing to evaluate myself honestly? How do I get past my own blinders? And as you mentioned, sometimes it's a spouse who is that honest mirror that helps you see, like, no, this is some things you maybe could work on. Maybe it's a key member of your team that you've given special ability to kind of convey some of those things that maybe you intentionally or otherwise don't see. But the point is, you have to do something about it. You can't just, this is the way I am, and I'm just going to live with this deficiency. Because if you live with that deficiency, you are going to get to a place where that deficiency is going to be the most important thing at the moment, and you're not going to have the ability to do it.
I'll pile on this with another story, and there's a lot of commanders out there, some here that could tell you, like, yeah, I've seen Wilson do the thing he's going to say he doesn't like. When I was sitting through one of the commander courses, one of the 06 commander courses, there was one of our general advisors who's still out there today leading airmen, told us a story about him losing his cool in a meeting. And the story he told was like, the person who caught his ire deserved it, admittedly deserved it. But then he said he went home that night and thought, that is not, like, he was frustrated with himself.
Yeah.
Because he said, I had a moment that was real, but I don't want to be that guy. I don't want that part of me that is natural to, like, be who I'm a commander. And then he's taught us all, he said, you know how many months it took for me to get them back? Like, because I unloaded on somebody who probably deserved it, but then everyone else went, I'm not opening my mouth, like, because you saw what he did to so-and-so.
Right.
I can tell you, and I tell people this all the time, I have done that too. I've been in a meeting and been frustrated with a commander, a subordinate commander, or somebody. I've said it for the 4th time, and I finally lost my cool. And that was my nature coming out, right? And I'm convinced to this day I'm right still, of course. But every one of those moments, if you ask me, what is your biggest, it's those moments that I regret, right? Because it's almost like being a parent. Like, as a dad, I don't like it when I get angry with my daughter, even though she deserves it. And there are moments when she needs correction. She doesn't hear it when I'm that upset. And so, once again, that's me. Now, not everyone is wired that way, but I'm that way. And I remember that general telling that story. And so then every time I want to just go, what in the blankety blank are you thinking? I stop and go, remember when you did that to that squadron commander? And they're out there, right, listening. And some of them are like, I remember when he yelled at me. And I can tell you, and I've told some of them personally, I regret it. And it's not my finest moment. That's not to let you off the hook for the thing you screwed up.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that you didn't deserve correction.
Yes, but I'm not proud of the way that I did it. And so that general's feedback to me was so profound, because I'm bringing this up because I can hear them in my head saying, like, yeah, that the correction was right and the thing the person did was wrong, but I want to be better than that. And they deserve a leader that is better than that. Yeah. And I'm not going to be that guy anymore. And I will just say, over time, I think I've gotten a little better. I have those moments now when somebody will mess up and I go, it's okay, it's fine. Like what I told my team, my last 2 teams in Colonel's Management, now in General Officer Management, I've been saying a lot of, like, hey, if it's not life or death, it isn't life or death, right? Like if it is, then we need to like pump the brakes and do this right. But if it's the rest of it, don't make it the same mistake twice. Don't do it because you're lazy, but it's okay to make mistakes. You know, and over time I've gotten that, because I can tell you Captain Wilson would have been that way.
Yeah.
I'm like, how dare you put the tab in the wrong place? Now I kind of go, it'll be okay. Right?
Yeah, we can survive this.
Yes.
Yeah. How does, I mean, you've had a lot of experience. You've made, as you said, you've made some mistakes. You've recognized from mistakes. You've learned from other people. What advice would you give to young leaders who are a little less self-aware? Or maybe they know that there's one of those three things that they're not so good at, but they don't know how much further they need to improve in order to at least be proficient at it. Any advice that you could give for how do you figure that out? Like, how do you get the kind of feedback that's necessary to make sense and self-evaluate? This is where I am. This is where I need to be.
Two things, right? So I would say the one that you can do all by yourself that's super simple that we should all do more of is talk less, listen more, right? That one, like I remind myself that often, right? Like you'd be surprised how much you'll learn if you'd stop talking and listen. And as a commander, when you stop talking, it creates space for people around you to talk, right? The second piece, which is harder, and I give this feedback to folks all the time, because we've all heard this, you know, I never get feedback. No one ever told me that. I don't know where I stand, or I don't know what they want. Never get feedback. And so I tell people a lot these days as a kind of, I've been doing talent management now for a while. I tell people, like, if you want feedback, you should go knock on your boss's door, get on the calendar. I haven't met a boss who won't, I mean, they're out there, but I haven't met a boss who won't, you know, maybe not today, but ask for time, and then go in and say, hey, boss, tell me what I'm missing. Tell me what you think. Tell me what you see, and don't worry about my feelings. Now, I caution people, be real careful, because most people will do it, right? And you may not love what you hear. Don't chalk it up as gospel, because everyone's opinion is their opinion. But I think it isn't that they're afraid to tell you candid truths. It's that most of us have been trained how to be decent people. And so I don't need to go around crushing everyone every day. I need to build them up. But if I have a commander who goes, I don't understand why I'm not the number one. I don't understand why I'm not the next guy, because I feel like I am that person. And like, hey, boss, you said I need to work on my attention to detail. What does that mean? I'll tell you.
Yeah.
Right? Ask for it. And so my challenge to your point, to people who maybe aren't getting out of this what they think they need, go ask for feedback. And if you really, really want to get feedback and be uncomfortable, turn to your peers, right? Over a drink or something privately and go, hey, what am I missing? But you got to give them the freedom to give it to you. Because most of us go like, yeah, you say that, but you don't really want me to tell you. But I've had these conversations with peers and others who have, you know, either told me like, hey, Dave, you need to, you know, your problem is you're picking every fight. Or I've told peers like, well, your problem is for you, everything is a, you know, it's an emotional moment. And the boss is looking for you to not bring them problems, to solve problems.
Yeah.
I've had bosses who've done the same thing, like, hey, Dave, you're doing great, but this, and this. And I would just say, if you want that feedback, go get it. I do not buy that we have a drought on people with an opinion. I just think people aren't sure that you want it unvarnished. And to be quite frank, I'm not convinced that most people want it unvarnished.
Yeah.
But to your point, if you want to get better, then you have to have those conversations, right? You have to tell your boss, hey, what can I do to do better, right? What can I do to solve this problem? Or when you have one of those moments I was describing where you really screw something up, right? You need to sit your team down and go, what did I miss? Like what, you know, because I'm going to miss stuff, but what did I miss along the way? And this is where, like, you know, your chief will tell you, right? They're the people, you know, they have nothing to lose. They'll be like, oh, here's what, right? Like the opportunity to fix this was back here. I used to tease Goose, man, what was it? Government travel cards, right? So Guzman would sit in my ear and whisper, we're losing thousands and thousands of dollars because we can't pay off our government travel cards. And I was thinking government purchase cards. I was like, no, I just got the briefing the other day. We're doing great. And he's like, sir, I'm telling you, you're giving money away because we're not getting these things paid off. And so finally I'd heard it enough, and I was like, we're sitting in staff meeting with all the commanders there, and I was like, guys, I'm like, contracting, stand up, and they're like, no, sir, we're good. And this is when the finance commander goes, but actually, sir, we're actually pretty bad. And then Goose is like, and then I go, well, how bad? And then he lays it out. He's like, well, we gave back $400,000 last month because we didn't have our bills paid off. And of course, I'm a wing commander. Like, I should know this.
Yeah.
And Goose is like, sorry, boss, I've kind of told you 3 times, boss, right? And so then I went, okay, well, show me. So then they briefed the next month, and I went, this is ridiculous. Like, and they're like, oh, and these people have been reimbursed. They just haven't paid their bill. So now I'm like Commander 101 moment, like, okay, goodness gracious, like, let's fix the problem, right? And now, of course, there's more to the problem. It's not as simple always. But that's the moment where Goose has got to be like, hey, boss, I don't want to say I told you so, but I kind of told you 3 times.
Yeah.
Like, and you weren't listening. So that goes back to step 1, which is like, sometimes talk less and listen more.
Yeah.
And people are giving you the answer to the test.
Yeah, that's a great 2-part answer to that question. I'm gonna go a step further on that, and I think while if you're not getting it, that's exactly right. I need to take the initiative for my own development, my own career. Nobody cares more about me than me in the end, so I need to go ask. But I think as leaders, we need to do a better job of giving candid feedback as I owe this to you. And I owe it to you even when it's not positive. And it's not, I'm telling Dave that you're lousy at something. What I really want to be thinking about is how can Dave be better? What's the gap that I notice? You may be the best person I've ever worked with, but what could you do that would make you even better? I owe you that, because otherwise you don't know. And there have been times you get busy or whatever, and somebody will come ask for feedback, and maybe that's an indicator that, gosh, I should have maybe been on top of this myself. But how do we as a service, or how do you as a leader convey to younger leaders that this is a requirement, this is something you must do, that you actually owe people to sit down and have the honest conversation? The other piece I think is secondary. It's, well, how do we prepare people to receive that kind of feedback? That's legitimate, but if we never give it, then we never have that second piece of it, and that can't be the right answer.
No, you're exactly right, and it's hard. You're right. The answer is hard because it requires. Because I think sometimes people, they confuse feedback with candor, right? So it's like, well, I'll sit down and tell you what I think. Like, well, that's part of feedback, but the other part of feedback is, do you know what it is you expect? And have you made it clear to the audience what you expect?
Yeah.
Because sitting down after the fact and going, hey, you failed, is not a good answer, right? Like,
yeah, exactly.
And I decided yesterday that you failed. Because they're going to go, well, boss, I didn't know that was a thing you wanted. And so, and to be frank, it is okay for these relationships to evolve over time, right? And this is why constant conversations and, most subordinates, if you're speaking frequently, it's easier to have those conversations. But to your point, I think you have to think through, what do I expect of this officer, this NCO? And I always start with small things, right? Because, I'm a big believer in, if we're faithful to little things, like the big things get done, right? So if you go in and go, hey, I need you to be the best CE squadron commander in the Air Force. Okay, well, I'll get right after that, right? Like, as if that wasn't my goal. But the thing that I usually start with, and even to this day, and with group commanders, I'll say, hey, meet suspenses and be professional. Do the little things. Your judgment matters. I'm weighing your judgment. Like when you make decisions, and then if I see them go off track, I'm going to have a conversation with you. And I know that sounds silly, but to most people that have struggled, it's rarely. I mean, the criminal stuff is easy, right?
Yeah,
you can't
right.
Drink and drive. Sorry, like you're out.
Right.
But usually it's like, hey, well, how come I'm not the number one commander in your wing? I go, well, the main reason is because you don't meet suspenses, your evals aren't turned in on time, your airmen aren't being developed. Right, your budget's not being executed. It's the blocking and tackling, and then once if you start doing that, we're having a different conversation with a different group of people, and then with those people, now I'm talking about judgment, right? I'm talking about decision making and what happens in the heat of the battle and how you get there, and when you come in and ask for guidance. And so my point with all of that is, it requires forethought.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Feedback requires. So if you walk into a feedback session and I'll be frank, I've done this, right? I've been this guy. If you walk into a feedback session and go, oh, you're here for feedback, great. Let me tell you what I think. Then you're not doing service to the conversation, right? I'm not saying you have to follow the form. The Air Force form is to help us do the thinking in advance. But what you need to be prepared to help the officer through, and you hit it on the head, is that not everyone, even though we are all competing to some extent, not everyone is going to the same place.
Yeah.
So some people you need to have a conversation about, what is it you want to be? Here's what I think you should be. Here's what I think you can be. Here's what I think is standing between you and your goals. and also kind of being frank sometimes and saying to some people, hey, I don't think, like, if your goal is to be, the MAJCOM commander, I don't think that's in your future. If that shocks you, then like we can start there. Or, and I hate to say this, too often officers in our world get too focused on the 3 jobs from now. So as a commander, you spend a lot of time going, hey, they go, I want to be the A3, and I go, copy. Let's focus on today's job, right?
Right.
Let's get this done right. That might open those doors in the future.
Yeah.
And so I would just say, I am harsher on leaders, supervisors. So some of this goes back to self-reflection, that we owe it to them, to your point, and then you have to think through it. You have to give that candid feedback, and it may not always be in a formal feedback setting, but don't use that as an excuse, because this is another thing that I would say we fail on, is that people who go, I don't need to give formal feedback, I talk to them every day. Yeah, that's not the same thing.
Yeah.
Because sometimes, and I'm the same way as a subordinate, my boss needs to close the door, and on the calendar needs to say my name, and they need to come in without a task list and go, we need to talk about you.
Right.
Good, bad, and ugly.
Yeah.
And so you need to do both, right? And if you're doing these things on a frequent basis, you'll get there. I had a group commander, one of my group commanders, who was a wonderful individual and I love dearly. But to his credit, after a few months in the job, he told me, he's like, hey, sir, I need to sit down and talk with you. And I was like, about what? He goes, I don't know, but we don't get much time together. Right. And he's like, and I don't know if I'm working your priorities. And I know you're moving real fast, and you tell me when you're not happy, but I need more than that. And I was like, okay. So we sat down and we started these more frequent tag ups, and he's exactly right. Like in that session, he would go, what do you think about these things? He was picking my brain, but also forcing me to think about problems that I wasn't thinking about.
Yeah. And I think, and we're going to wrap up here in just a second, but I think that the more senior you get, the larger the number of people you're responsible for, the bigger your mission, the more tempting it is to just wave a big hand and say, I am providing good leadership, and it's very vague and faceless and nameless. Real feedback is when you're thinking about, who am I directly responsible for? Who is looking to me for direct supervisory feedback? And am I speaking to that person as an individual, and am I being deliberate about the way I do it? And so I want to just sum up our conversation with a point, really 2 points that have come through everything that you've said, and it doesn't surprise me because you are a great leader. The 2 most important words that go with leadership are being intentional, absolutely being deliberate about everything you do. It's not accidental and it's not by assumption. And the second thing is, how do I apply that intentionality to individual people that I'm responsible for? If you can do those 2 things, be deliberate, intentional, and be individual in the way in which you are communicating expectations and feedback, you will be the greatest leader most people ever have. That's my honest feeling.
No, I think you're spot on. I mean, I would, if I can kind of give my last,
Sure.
my last thought on this is that, it's hard. I think we all know it, right?
Indeed.
The goal is to make it simple, but that doesn't make it easy, right? But to try to take the complex and make it simple, so that it's digestible. And then one thing as a leader, and this is, for anybody out there in assignment land listening, right? Like, we're all looking for the next command opportunity. So put me in, boss, right? But our goal is to build a cohesive team, right? Where people feel, this is why things like slogans, uniformity, right? Like purpose, this is why we're all looking for that patch that's got our spirit animal on it, whatever that is, to give the team some sense of identity so that we're all, got it, we're all rowing together, right?
Yeah.
And then to be clear as a leader on where we're rowing to, right? And then from there, my experience in the air, they will shock you with how effective they can be. But if you feel like you're adrift, if you feel like they're adrift, it's because they're waiting for you to tell, like, what are we doing, right? We're going to sit here until you tell us what we're doing, right? I don't have to like it, but we got to do it together. And as a leader, it's okay if halfway there you go, wait a minute, we're changing direction. That's another thing that's hard for us. So I would just say to those leaders out there, I don't care if you're a lieutenant running a 4-person team, or a sergeant, or if you're a civilian, retired military, or civilian in a leadership position, or if you're a wing commander, who are we? What is our identity? What is it we've been asked to do? And then and get your leadership team in a room to decide on that together. It isn't a democracy, but if you're alone on the island, you have a problem.
Right.
And then, to channel Goose, just like ferociously say it over and over and over. And Dan used to after the 9th press release and 12th time I've said it, I go, I've been clear. And Dan's like, you think every staff sergeant spouse knows about the thing you're doing? And I'm like, no. Like, then you're not done, sir. Like that, and you can't leave people behind like that. If you're running so fast and you're like, well, the comm squadron will catch up. No, that's not how this works. And you can't do it without them.
Right.
And so to your point, I think that's the challenge of leadership. And that's why all of us who've done it, don't get me wrong, anyone who's been a commander for more than a couple of years will tell you, I need to drop my rucksack and breathe for a minute.
Sure.
But within 30 minutes out of the job, all you want is back in the ring again, right? And just looking for the opportunity to go back and go, hey, I can do it better this time.
Yeah. Well, Colonel Dave Wilson, I'm confident that more opportunities await you. Thanks so much for sharing your thoughts, sharing your wisdom and lessons learned. I think it's been really valuable. I look forward to talking to you again.
Thank you, sir.
Before long. Okay.
Thank you for listening to Building Better Leaders. If you'd like to learn more about the Doolittle Leadership Center or the leader development workshops we deliver all around the world, please visit us at afa.org/DLC. Helping you become a better leader is our passion and our purpose.